Tomorrow is our 18-month anniversary, and every couple I've ever photographed got divorced exactly at 18 months. Not around, not eventually, exactly. I'm alone in my studio. The red recording light is on. It's almost midnight. I'm recording this because if I try to say it to your face, Lena, I'll soften it. I'll joke, or I'll wait for a better moment. And I'm done waiting. A few weeks ago, I found a folder on my hard drive labeled Divorced. I didn't name it as a joke. I named it because my life is folders. Raw, edits, album, delivered. And then, divorced. I opened it expecting a handful of clients. People drift apart, it happens. But it wasn't a handful. It was enough names to make me sit back in my chair and feel the room tilt.
So I did what I always do when something doesn't make sense. I organized. I checked the wedding dates, then the separation dates, then I checked them again because my brain refused the first answer. It lined up. Clean. Too clean. I kept looking for one exception. Just one. There wasn't one. And now we're one day away. That's the part I couldn't say out loud. Not until tonight. Lena, if you ever listen to this later, I'm sorry I didn't tell you the first night I noticed. I told myself I was sparing you. What I was really doing was sparing myself the shame of admitting how afraid I can be. I need to explain how I got here. Not the romantic version. Not the version that makes me look noble. The plain version.
I grew up in Queens. When I was 19, I'd sit on the fire escape outside my mother's apartment and watch couples walk down Roosevelt Avenue on summer nights. You could hear vendors shouting in Spanish, music leaking from windows, the subway rattling overhead like a steel heartbeat. Couples weren't glamorous. Men in work boots, women in scrubs, plastic grocery bags swinging between them. But there was affection there, quiet, stubborn. Like two people building a small shelter against the world. That's why I loved weddings, long before I ever worked one. Not the flowers, not the money. One day where two people say out loud, "I choose you," even if I'm scared. I wanted to believe that sentence could hold. My first camera came from a pawn shop. It smelled like metal and old smoke.
It was heavier than it looked. A kind of weight that makes you feel like an adult. Especially when you grew up watching your mom count coins at a kitchen table. I photographed friends, birthdays, street festivals, people laughing so hard they forgot the camera existed. That's when I learned my first real rule. The best moments happen when people forget you're there. Then I shot my cousin's City Hall elopement. She wore blue, not white. She kept pressing her thumb to a tiny tattoo on her wrist, like she needed proof she was real. My photos weren't perfect, but when she cried looking at them, I understood what I'd found. I wasn't photographing decorations, I was photographing belief. After that, weddings came nonstop. Churches, barns, rooftops in Brooklyn, where the skyline looked like a promise.
Laptop fan whining, espresso instead of sleep. You walked in shaking your umbrella like a nervous dog, apologizing to nobody. Sorry, I'm dripping everywhere. The room felt warmer in seconds. Wet hair on your cheek, a tan coat with a ripped pocket. That look people get when they're annoyed and amused at themselves at the same time. You were real. Everything else in my life had started to feel staged. You saw my camera and asked if I was a real photographer or just a guy who takes latte pictures. Real enough, I said. You laughed and said you were a real florist. Then you rolled your eyes and repeated it. Real enough. Like you were testing the phrase. We talked for 20 minutes. I never went back to editing. You asked questions like you weren't collecting facts.
Like you were checking what lived underneath. When I said I shot weddings, you smiled, but not fully. I love love, you said, but weddings are pressure cookers. They're still beautiful, I said. They are, you replied. But beautiful things can still break. I didn't know how much that sentence would echo later. Our first date was dumplings in Chinatown. We burned our mouths and laughed about it. We walked down Mott Street while the city steamed after rain. You hated cliches, and you cried at old romance movies. You tried to deny it. You weren't convincing. I forgot to check my phone. That detail still matters to me. I proposed 6 months later in that same coffee shop. I planned a speech, practiced it, printed a photo of you under a streetlight.
But when I slid the ring across the table, all I said was, "I don't want a future that doesn't have you in it." You looked at me for a long moment. Then, softly, "Okay, yes." We cried. The barista looked away. The receipt is still taped inside our engagement album, like evidence. At our wedding, you wore simple silk, no lace. Your bouquet was ranunculus and pale peach. You said peaches felt like sunrise. We married in Prospect Park. Trees smelled like late summer. After the ceremony, behind the boathouse, you held my face. "Promise we won't become a story we hate." Like what? Like people who stop being kind. "I promise," I said. I meant it. That promise lodged in my throat the night I opened that folder. It started with a message. A bride from 2 years ago. "Can you remove our photos? We're divorced." Then another email.
Then another. "We separated. Finalizing the divorce. Please remove the album." Every time, I felt a quiet grief, like the air thinning. I told myself it was normal. Then one night in March, I was cleaning my hard drive. You were asleep on the couch, a magazine drooping on your chest, the TV muted. I noticed a folder tagged divorced. Then another. Not many. Enough. I opened my client list. I'm not proud of what I did next, but curiosity is slippery at 3 in the morning. I made a spreadsheet. Name, date, location. I looked them up. Not stalking, just confirming. Changed bios, missing rings. A single comment under a photo. We tried. By morning, my chest was tight. 47 couples, every one divorced. Not randomly, exactly at that line. I waited for an exception. There wasn't one.
I went to bed next to you and stared at the ceiling, counting backward through our calendar, telling myself numbers don't matter. I should have told you then. Instead, I made excuses. Maybe I attracted anxious couples. Maybe it was the era. Stress, money, Instagram weddings. But 47? That's not the era. After that, I couldn't stop replaying weddings in my head. The groom snapping, the bride flinching, toasts that landed wrong. I'd always edited around those moments. That's the job. But what if that was the problem? What if I gave people a version of themselves they couldn't live up to? What if I delivered a highlight reel so clean that ordinary life felt like failure? I started seeing cracks everywhere. Tight hands, smiles arriving late, jokes about ball and chain that weren't jokes. I came home late, sat by the window, zoomed into faces, hunting for warnings, like warnings could protect me. You noticed. "You okay, Mark?" "Just tired." You trusted me. That's the weight I carry now. Around month 16, numbers invaded my mornings. 1 month, 3 weeks, 10 days. Our home stopped feeling safe. It felt like a waiting room. Then I realized something worse. The pattern wasn't about them. It was about me. I remembered things I'd said at weddings. Don't perform. Be real. And I heard it differently. What if be real became stop trying? What if my honesty wasn't healing, but contagious? Here's the part I hate admitting. I've been afraid, not of you, of needing you. I've been afraid that if I let myself feel safe, I'll lose it.
So I waited for disaster. And then I started living like it was already scheduled. That's what the spreadsheet really was. Not proof. Permission. Permission to brace. Permission to pull back early and call it wisdom. 2 nights ago, you were in Boston. The apartment felt hollow. I went to the studio and told myself I'd back up files. I didn't. I opened Our Wedding, raw. Inside was an audio file. Lena to Marcus. Voice memo. I clicked it. My voice filled the room. "I'm scared," I said. "I see endings everywhere. If I ever pull away, please don't let me. Pull me back." I remembered recording it. Wedding night. You washing pins from your hair. Me hiding fear in a folder. Like fear becomes safer when you label it. That's when it hit.
I'd been living by a deadline long before I discovered one. The divorces weren't a curse. They were a mirror. I believed love expires, and I carried that belief into rooms where people were trying to believe the opposite. I dressed it up as realism, as art, but it was still fear, and I wasn't invisible. Weddings absorb emotion. People feel what you feel, even if they don't know they're feeling it. Lena, I've been living like love is something you document, like it's safest behind glass, and I'm tired of it. Tomorrow, when you come home, I'm going to tell you everything. Not the polished version, the real one. And then I'm going to ask you to choose me again, not in front of everyone, but on an ordinary Tuesday, when nothing special is happening at all. Because that's where love actually lives, and that's where I want to learn how to live with you.
Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story.